Welcome to the Fellowship Network podcast, where we have real conversations with real independent ministers like you so that we can all receive the encouragement and equipping that we need to do the work of the ministry. My name is Adam, and I'm joined as always by my friend and teammate, Chip Payne. How's it going today, Chip?
Hey, Adam, it's so good to see you and glad to be here.
Awesome.
It's been a rainy day here in Texas, but we don't always get a lot of rain. So
although Texas thunderstorms are no joke. Like, how much rain are we talking about here?
Actually, north of the DFW Metroplex, there's been major flooding, like all the roads in people's neighborhoods are like up midway to their car.
That's no good.
Yeah. But fortunately, where I'm at, we're just getting this nice, even rain.
Well, glad to hear it. Hopefully it's not disrupting life too much. It's a beautiful day out here in North Idaho. So yeah, I like where I live. I'm glad I'm not dealing with flooding right now. But we are joined today by our friend Travis Moffitt. Travis is the World Missions Director for the Fellowship Network. He preached his first sermon at the age of 16 and has ministered in 19 countries and counting. Travis, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Adam. It's great to be here with you both. Good to see you, Chip.
Good to see you too, Travis.
So, Travis, I'm kind of curious about something. You've ministered in 19 countries. You have traveled around a lot, and I'm sure that you've tasted all kinds of amazing local cuisine over the years. Tell me, what is the most extreme meal you ever had where you, in an international country, where you had to pretend to like it, even though it really wasn't the most appetizing thing?
Probably the most extreme meal would be in Thailand. Several years ago, we were walking through kind of the street market and had crickets on a skewer just right off of the grill. And it was one of those interesting deals where when you first put the cricket in your mouth, you're like, wow, the seasoning on this is pretty good. The biggest problem with that was the cricket aftertaste. About 20 minutes later and carried all the way through to the next morning. It was like, you just kind of want to scrape your tongue out when you're done. So I don't think I will duplicate that again, although I'm fine with eating pretty strange foods, but that'll be the most extreme.
So being a missionary is like being on Fear Factor. Got it.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Clearly fear is not a factor for you, at least as far as eating crickets.
Amazing. So we mentioned earlier you preached your first sermon at 16. You've been in 19 countries. When did you first feel the call of God on your life to go to the nations?
To go to the nations specifically, man, that's a good question. I can say that I have always consciously felt a call of God on my life to preach. My mom would tell the story, and my dad would tell the story of me as like 4 or 5 years old, before I could read, with what you remember, those little pocket New Testaments, had the New Testament, Psalms, Proverbs, with like my pocket New Testament,
the sitting on this Gideon Bibles.
Yeah, I like the little Gideon Bible. You can stick it in your pocket. So here I am with my pocket New Testament, sitting on the steps out in front of the church with the Bible upside down. I didn't even know, right side, upside, whatever, and a bunch of little kids sitting around, and I'm preaching to them just at this young age. Having watched my parents in ministry all my life, it was just sort of like always there. I knew right after high school that I was supposed to go to Christ for the Nations as a student. And my first international missions trip was when I was 16. But really, I would say, like, there's a call specifically to an assignment in an international capacity would have been in 2004. So my wife and I were at a church here in Tampa, Florida called Morning Star Church, and we took what was our first trip into the nation of Honduras, where I've now been probably 100 times. Took that first trip, and I remember being on that trip, just fell in love with Honduras, fell in love with the people. We had had some training prior to that trip specifically for leading short-term missions trips. And I distinctly remember being in the training class, literally, Adam, just in tears. I mean, the instructor is teaching us how to buy trip insurance, and I'm just like weeping through the training because there was just something going on in my heart.
And it wasn't just because you were talking about insurance.
Yeah, it wasn't just talking about insurance, right? That's sad enough. But and it wasn't a sadness so much. It was just like, man, there's just something to this. When my wife and I were flying home from that trip, I remember telling her, babe, when we get home, we can just sell everything and move to Honduras. And in her great wisdom, she's like, bruh, just, slow down a little
Yeah.
bit. Let's see what the Lord will do here. But I remember talking to my dad just days after that trip and saying, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to take people on missions trips. And so specifically the call to the nations, that would have been 2004. Honduras is the nation that got me.
Fantastic. And was it Central America specifically, or did God start to work on your heart and expand things after that?
Yeah. So after that, I became the missions director for that church, Morning Star Church, and we led teams back into Honduras about every 6 months for the next probably about 4 years. And so I was in Honduras very regularly, and developed a great love for Honduras specifically and Latin America generally. And then from there, my wife and I and another couple ended up forming a missions organization where we continue to work in Honduras. And then also doors were opened up for us in Mexico and Colombia and just some other places. That's when we had the opportunity to go to Thailand. We did some ministry work in Europe. But there was a season there in around 2015. That year we were in like 5 or 6 different countries: Haiti, Colombia, Thailand, Honduras, I believe Mexico. And the Lord really started to refine and bring some focus for us, where he said, hey, I want you to specifically work in Honduras only. And so we started saying no to other invitations because we felt like that's the way the Lord was directing us. And what we found is that as we invested with greater focus in the specific area, whether that's a country or type of ministry, whatever, for us, it was both. It was the country of Honduras and some certain ministry categories. Then in his timing, he began opening up other doors. We had opportunity to go into Cuba, subsequently back into Europe. And even as my family and I have changed assignments of what ministry organization we're working with, we've seen the Lord, especially in most recent years, open up widely a lot of doors. I had opportunity in 2024 for my first trip into Africa, and that was amazing. You and I were just a couple of weeks ago in Jamaica, and so just seeing the Lord open up different geographies. Yeah, man. So seeing the Lord open up some different geographies from both the obedience as well as the things we learned by working in Honduras and Latin America, we've seen it apply in other regions as well.
Yeah. You've been to a lot of countries and you've supported a lot of missionaries over the years. I'm kind of curious, what do you wish non-missionaries knew, or what misconception do you wish you could clarify about what it's like for missionaries in the field?
That's a great question. Yeah. So to give a little bit of context, I've always lived in the United States. I've always been willing to move somewhere else, but that's not the path that the Lord had for my family and I. But it's put us into a position where we could have very in-depth conversations with U.S.-based pastors and lots of conversations with from whatever country they're originally from, but now foreign-based resident missionaries. And probably one of the greatest, I don't know if it's a misconception, but I think it's something that the church generally doesn't think about for foreign-based missionaries, is that one of the most prominent challenges that a foreign missionary who's living overseas faces is a general sense of isolation that runs really deep. So when you take a person out of their home country, whatever culture is going to be their home culture that they're most familiar with, and you plant them into another culture, it's not simply the dynamic of, okay, let me get over here and feed as many kids as possible as fast as possible. That family is also learning language. More than language, they're learning cultural differences.
Yeah.
The cultural differences are huge. So even for our short-term teams, we do a lot of teaching on culture shock so that people can understand what they're experiencing in their soul level as they're engaging in another culture. So let's say you know somebody, they're going to go be a missionary. You tell them, hey, we love you. We're proud of you. We're going to come visit you. We're going to write you a letter. We're going to call you every week. We're going to support your ministry. And then off they go. And then we in home culture kind of go to Starbucks. We kind of go back to like normal life, and not neglectful, and not
Life goes on. It's a natural
life
thing.
goes on. That's right.
Yeah.
For that person who's now become a foreign missionary on foreign soil, the sense of isolation is absolutely incredible, and it becomes a major tension for that missionary in just continuing to do life on foreign soil. So if I could help, let's call it the U.S. church, understand anything about foreign missionaries, it would be that the level of connectivity that you can maintain, letters, telephone call, simple text, a WhatsApp text, man, that's like
It's gold.
relational gold. That's right.
Yeah. I
Jeez.
wanted to ask, you're speaking of the missionary, but speak of the dynamic of regarding missionary families, their marriages, their kids. What do they go through? I mean, I'm familiar because I've been one myself, but even missionary families that have lived long term, the kids are U.S. citizens, but they're not really Americans because they've lived in such a different culture. So would you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so let's take that same isolation concept. So let's say it's just a husband and wife, no kids. Husband and wife move to foreign soil, and they, as husbands and wives do, have challenges in their marriage. They don't know how to communicate, they don't know how to pay bills, they don't know how to, all the things that we don't know how to do as a married couple, right? Husbands don't know how to be husbands because you've never been a husband. And wives don't know how to be wives because you've never been a wife, probably. So here they are now learning about marriage in a vacuum, in a relational vacuum. So pastoral ministry becomes huge for a family context. Then you add kids into there. Now you're trying to figure out how to be a husband and a dad, or a wife and a mom. And so having some pastoral care just to deal with the isolation is a big deal. Now, with kids and their own concept of where they live, that becomes a big deal because sometimes it's just the language, right? But language represents mindset. So oftentimes you'll have mom and dad who were called to the mission field, either had kids before they left or had kids on the mission field, and they use this language. We're in, let's call it Honduras. We're going to go home for the holidays, right? Let's go home for Christmas. So they're going to go back to Texas or Florida or wherever. And that's where home is, because that's what mom and
except it isn't to those kids.
Except it isn't for the kids. That's exactly right. So the kids grew up in Honduras. Home is La Ceiba or Tegucigalpa or whatever, right? So then mom and dad go home. They haven't been home in, call it 2-3 years. And you know how fast everything's changing in the United States, right? So mom and dad go home. Everything's different. They built a new highway. They closed down the old Sack and Save, and I don't know where anything is. And Starbucks is now $8 a glass, and it's just driving me nuts. And the kids are now visiting, they're visitors at quote unquote home. So for kids, you get the expression that you'd hear commonly called third culture kids. So for kids, it becomes a little bit of a strain. There's what I know as home, where me and mom and dad live. They're calling over there where grandma is home, but all my buddies and my friends are over here. That kind of feels like home. So where do I actually fit as home? So my encouragement always for missionaries who are going to move to the field, if you have kids, is you've got to engage in the culture of where you're living as though that's the culture where you're going to live perpetually. The number one factor of long-term success for a resident missionary on the field is if they can make friends, not just associates and coworkers, but friends with people in that new host culture.
Interesting.
And then you let host culture become home. Now, if you ever move back to wherever you're from, US, Canada, Britain, whatever, then you're going to go back through that whole moving to a foreign soil again dynamic. But if God's called you to be a resident missionary in Honduras, the challenge for mom and dad is to make Honduras home, That way their kids can become, this is home. This is home for me. And I've watched it work both ways. I've seen missionaries who did not do that. And in my opinion, and it's both grievous outcomes. I've watched missionaries leave the field early because they're just burnt out, because the burden of tasks of the mission field is enormous. And if it's never actually my home, where I find the things that you find in home and family and community, then they go back either burnt out, or you find missionaries who've stayed on the field just out of like dogged determination, who then become a little bit cynical, if I can say it that way, if we can be real honest in our podcast here, who just become cynical to the nation that they're ministering in, but that's the financial mechanism that puts food on their table. So they can't unwind that, but I'm still not living at home. Then I've watched missionaries on the other side who made the place they were moving to home, and how it affects their children in the next generation is typically much more healthy, whether the kids stay in that home culture or return, in the context I'm thinking about specifically, to the United States. So one family, they had some kids who stayed in the ministry culture. They had some who went back to the United States. But in either case, those kids became much more balanced because mom and dad were not living sort of dual priorities for what was their home context.
Interesting. So let me ask you this. Overall, in your experience in your own life as a missionary, but also in serving and helping other missionaries, counseling them, coaching them, what warning signs or red flags, yellow flags have you seen? And when you see them, what do you need to do in order to, cut the devil off at the pass, so to speak?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. So the things that probably the big three that I'll see is, number one, cynicism. So just a heightened cynicism, terminology like, oh, these people of whatever the country, everybody, I love Honduras, so I'll pick on Honduras. Everybody in Honduras is blah, blah, blah. And that language shifts from cultural observation to negative connotations of the culture.
Judgment.
Right? Judgment, right.
Yeah.
So cultural awareness is fine. You should be aware of the cultural differences. But when it becomes a constant, I'm verbally throwing stones, I'm judging the culture, that's cynicism. That's a big red flag. Number two would be isolation. So when missionaries isolate themselves from the culture, and again, I can pick on Honduras specifically just because I know the dynamics in the country so well. There are parts of Honduras where there are a lot of U.S. missionaries, and there are parts of Honduras where there are not a lot of U.S. missionaries. And some of that is helpful because of language school and some of the resources that are available in certain regions of the country. But when I see someone move to, say, Honduras or any country, and then let's say they're from the United States, and they move there and immediately then find where the English-speaking church is, where all the U.S. missionaries go, and that's like, why wouldn't we do that? That's where it feels comfortable because that's what I can know and relate to. Over time, that creates a bit of isolation from the actual host culture. That isolation is very subtle, but it's very dangerous. Because the more I stay as a U.S. citizen living in Honduras or living in Tajikistan or wherever it is, the more I stay connected to my home culture on foreign soil, the less I'm connecting with actual friendships in that host culture. And now the host culture is not actually becoming my home. So like, for example, if when I'm coaching with missionaries, my question will be, well, do you have any friends in the culture where you live? Oh yeah, there's this guy I see all the time at the hardware store. Okay, great. That's not a friend. That's the cashier at the hardware store. Right? So my question is, who do you go have pizza with? Who would you call if you got arrested? Who would you call if you got in a fight? Who would you call if you needed to get into a fight? Who Who do you communicate with on a regular basis that you don't have to prove to them how righteous you are? Like you can just sort of let your hair down, as they say, and I can hang out with you in a t-shirt and flip-flops and we'll be okay. We're not going to judge each other. That's a friend. And so having a friend in the culture um, is a layer of insulation. What does the Bible say? And I'm harshly paraphrasing this. So somewhere in Proverbs, it's better a neighbor who's nearby than a brother who's far off, right? So who's the person that's close, that's geographically close, that you can trust and build relationship with? That's
Yeah.
an important person in your life as a missionary.
I observe a version of this with local church pastoring as well. I'm in North Idaho, relatively rural area, and we get pastors who come in here all the time and last only a few years because they don't make local friends. I have one church I was working with where one of the things they watched for was do their new pastoral hires change their license plate to the local state, right? And if they
There you go.
don't, it's like, uh-oh, is this person going to last? You have to love the land and the people. At the same time, we need to have a healthy relationship with our support system back home, stateside, whatever. And for many missionaries, it's a financial necessity. So how do you navigate that where, yes, you want to have your heart in the country that you're ministering, but you need those connections stateside financially, but also just as a support system and a safety net?
Sure. So one thing to realize for both the missionary and the support community back home, as we're saying, back from whatever the home country was, is that the longer that missionary lives on the field, the more uh, um, distance there is between each of their cultural understandings, right? So if you've ever had a missionary come back to your church and you're like, that guy used to be cool, but now he's weird. And it's like, yes, that's how it works because they're being adapted to the culture they're living in.
Yeah, I can think of a few of those.
You can think of a few of those, and that's okay. That's the normal process. And for the missionary, if you're like, you go back home and, pastor used to be cool and now he's weird, that's normal. It's because wherever home culture was is changing, and wherever missionary lives, that is weighing on them and changing on them. So from a fundraising standpoint, a couple things. Number one, communication is like you cannot over communicate. And what's happening, in my opinion, is that in missional contexts, there's been a steady decline of communication over the last, let's call it the last 20 years. And it's for
Really,
two primary reasons.
Even with email and the internet and all the ways that you say we communicate
100%.
less now than we did
Less.
20 years ago?
Absolutely. In my opinion, from what I have observed, and for two reasons. Number one is that there are fewer pulpit opportunities for missionaries than there were, let's back up. Really, we got to probably back up more than at least 20 years ago and then further. So when my parents were starting out in ministry and itinerating, it was very plausible that they could go on multi-week tours where they're preaching somewhere Sunday morning, a different church Sunday night, a different church Wednesday, maybe a couple of groups in between, a businessman's meeting, businesswoman's meeting, and then start over next Sunday morning, Sunday night. When I was a kid, we'd jump in the van and go on these multi-week tours throughout the Southeast United States and the Central United States, where a lot of my parents' supporters were for their ministry. That was easy to do. Churches don't operate in that kind of a system anymore. A lot of churches don't have a Sunday night, a Wednesday night. And so when you take a senior pastor who's got 52 weeks, 52 Sunday mornings of the year, minus, an anniversary week, Easter, Christmas, Mother's Day, those are kind of already predetermined. The pastor's got maybe 40, 45 weeks of communication in a pulpit setting to their congregation. Understandably so. Most senior pastors are a little more reluctant to give up a weekend, to say it that way, for a missionary who may or may not be a great speaker. Not all missionaries are great speakers. I'm just saying. I'm not trying to throw stones. I'm just saying. So that limits the amount of pulpit time. A lot of missionaries that I know still think that pulpit ministry is a great form of fundraising, and in most cases it is not, and partially because of that. The second thing is what you kind of alluded to, is the use of email as a messaging tool as opposed to the printed newsletter. So snail mail in the last years has become so much more expensive that the idea of sending a letter has become unsustainable for cost effectiveness for most missionaries. But we treat email and snail mail differently. So
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember that back in the day when you got a letter, let's go way back in the day, like Paul writing to the Corinthians, he didn't write that letter to a single person. He expected that letter was going to go to the pastor of the church and then be stuck on the proverbial, message board for
Yeah.
everyone to read.
Circulated around and around, and we're still reading it 2,000 years later.
100%. So I go into churches in these days, and some churches will still have like a pin board up, like here's our missions board, and you'll see a snail mail letter from a missionary written 3 years ago or 4 years
Oh,
ago.
wow.
And it's like, yeah, we all it's like, oh, that's cringy. Well, it's not necessarily cringy. That letter's getting passed around, but we don't treat email that way. Like, I don't get an email from a missionary and then forward that out to 50 friends so that they can all read it too. That would be spam. So the other thing that happens on the backside of how we treat emails is we have all of these darn analytics. So a missionary writes an email and it goes out to 100 people and they get a 50 or 30 or 20% open rate analytic, and they say, what's the point? Nobody's reading my email. So what I coach missionaries to do is still send the email. In fact, don't send one every quarter. Send 2 a month. Send one every week. Have the first 10, 20 characters of your subject line be identical, every single email with your name in it. And then after that, whatever's going to be specific to that email. Why? Because for the pastor or missions director, volunteer leader, whatever it is, who's opening that, the idea is not shooting for 100% open rate, but shooting for awareness. That email still pops in an inbox. A person still has to scroll past and say, oh yeah, Chip's on the mission field. I love that guy. Lord bless Chip. They're going to pray for you quickly and move on, even if that email doesn't get opened. And then occasionally they will get opened and read. But
Yeah,
missionaries, for the most part, don't do that.
I can attest that is true in practically every industry. Sending email is like going to the gym. Repetition beats intensity every time.
Every time.
So for any minister out there, send more email. It has the highest return on investment of all of our digital tools. And we're talking about the nitty gritty here of how missionaries connect. I want to zoom out a little bit. I grew up in denominational churches where we would get missionary visits probably 3 or 4 times a year. We had the missions board up in the lobby with all the pictures, and we were vaguely aware of what was going on. But we didn't really have to worry about the funding side of it because the denomination took care of that, right? A percentage of the church budget was designated towards it, and we all knew that some of our tithes and offerings were going to it, and the denomination helped with that. Is a good system. We're independent. We're a network of independent ministers, and I feel like this is one area where the denominations really have a leg up on us in that they have systems of helping ministries abroad get the funding they need in a sustainable way. I really want to learn more about this. How do independent ministers survive? Because it sounds like a whole lot of cold calling. I actually got a call from a minister in Honduras, if you're listening. Hi, good to see you. Who just called me out of the blue just a couple weeks ago and said, hey, can I come by with my family and talk about financial partnership? And I so respect the courage to do that. But that sounds terrifying because you're going to get a lot of no's and you need quite a few yeses in order to pay your bills. So what can we be doing better as an independent network to help resource missionaries in the field this way?
Okay, that's a great question. I love talking about fundraising and missionary resourcing. And I think that's the first part of it is a lot of people will tell you, oh, fundraising is the necessary evil of missions. I hate that language. I think that fundraising as a missionary is a way that you're inviting people onto your team
Yeah,
and that
partnership.
they are also participatory in the ministry work. Everybody has a different role in that. And so a lot of it has to do with mindset of both the missionary and the local church, the local church pastor, and the members of that church, right? That everybody gets away from this. This is just a financial exchange type of agreement. I'm not a fan of that language. So a couple of things. As we just talked about, regularity of communication is a big deal. There's a book from like, it was written either in the 70s or the 80s called Friend Raising. Friend Raising. It's a much
That's so
older
good.
book. Such a good book. And the basic premise of the book is that they're talking about that you are raising friends. You're trying to actually cultivate genuine relationships more so than you are trying to cultivate donors. Okay. So in my experience of fundraising, I have probably raised funds slower. I've watched me and teams I've led raise funds slower than other people who were just like, we're going after the dollar. However, I've watched myself and teams I've been a part of and really learned this from my parents is have raised funds with much longer sustainability.
Yeah, the
So if you're
relationship.
just going for, if you're just going for the quick, hey, will you be my donor? Your attrition rate is going to be much
Much
higher.
higher.
You're
Yeah.
going to lose donors faster. I learned this from my parents. My parents have been in full-time ministry over 50 years. They have people who have been financial partners with them for 50 years. Like, that's unheard of. That's ridiculous. Who does that?
That's incredible. Praise God.
Yeah, it's incredible, but it's because their focus has been on relationships. So whether you're the missionary coming to call Adam and say, hey, can I come and talk to you? Or you're the Adam getting the phone call, focus on, I want to build a relationship. So I agree with you. The chutzpah it takes to just pick up the phone and cold call somebody and say, hey, can I come talk to you is great. The only thing I would recommend is leave the to talk to you about financial partnership out of the phone call. Hey, Adam, I'm a member of the fellowship. You don't know me. I'm going to be in your area. Can I take you for a cup of coffee? I'd like to get to know you. Right. And then if you're the missionary and you're listening to this, you pay for the coffee. Please, if you invite somebody out for coffee or steak dinner, do not automatically expect that that pastor or media director or missions director or whomever is going to pay for it. Like you wouldn't do that in any other context. So don't do it in this context.
That's
If you're
great.
doing the invite, you do the paying. Okay. And then when you get there, Adam, tell me about you. Right. So basic friendship 101. Tell me about yourself and listen, right? Missionary, listen. Okay. And work towards actually building a friendship. People may become partners with you by being the person who's praying for you, by being the person who's writing you an encouraging message, or by being the person who's a donor, or ideally all three, because they're your friend. Now, switch over to the pastor side. Pastor, missions director, volunteer leader, whatever. Somebody calls you and says, um, I know, Adam, what you like is statistical data, but I'm going to give you an anecdotal story.
No problem. No problem. Bring it.
um, so there was a pastor that I met in person, just briefly, and so everybody knew what was going on. I'm the missionary, they're the pastor, and a mutual friend introduced us, right? And I said to them in the meeting, "Hey, it's very nice to meet you. Can I give you a call? And I'd love to hear more of your story and tell you a little bit about our story." To which the pastor said, "That'd be great." So then a week or two goes by. I call the church. This was a local church setting. I call the church to make the appointment. The administrative assistant who gets the call says, "Well, why do you want to meet with the pastor?" I said, "Well, I just met them the other day, just impromptu, and I'm a missionary. I live here in town. I work in Honduras, and I'd love to just meet them." To which the person says, "You know what? We have enough missionaries already, and I don't think the pastor's going to meet with you." And I'm like, okay, that's tacky.
That's heartbreaking. Don't say that
Eh,
out loud.
yeah, yeah. But it's not uncommon, right? So every
No,
missionary listening to this is going to be like, yep, I've had that phone call. So my encouragement on the receiving end of that phone call is to be gracious and say, I'd love to meet with you, right? You have this expression that comes up called donor fatigue. You've probably heard of this expression, where basically I'm saying, I'm going to add a little sarcasm to this. I'm the wealthy donor, but I get tired of people asking me for money. And it's like, okay, number one, if you live in the United States, you're wealthier than like 99% of the rest of the world. Two, if you're a local church pastor, if you are a missions director, you have intentionally by career positioned yourself to be collaborative in the Great Commission, which is both here and over there.
amen.
So be gracious, like be open to the conversation. Now, that does not mean you have to give money to everybody who sits down and says, would you give me some money? In fact, the person who sits down and only says, would you give me some money? Maybe just say no. But for the person who sits down and says, I'd like to form a relationship with you,
It's really
and
good.
my encouragement is to be willing to engage into that relationship. You talked about us as an independent organization. We are called the fellowship. And I have said to both of you guys and to other people as well, to me, the crown jewel, the gold of the fellowship is fellowship. It's the idea that we are, while being independent ministries and independent churches and independent ministers, we can be mutual collaborators and fellow friends, brothers and sisters in Christ with one another, not only in, you're going to get me soapboxing, but not only in, um, like a, like a platform setting, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, but in like a real nitty gritty kind of a setting. Like in a, I will take your phone call. I will have coffee with you. Oh, I'll actually send some money in your direction because that's how the Lord has equipped me in this part of the relationship. But not only money, we will actually pray for you. We will have friendship and conversation with you, right? So you
You
just
know,
be open and gracious to the conversation.
it's interesting. As you've been talking, Travis, the thing I just was reminiscing about. Excuse me, that's a big word. It's really about Paul and Macedonia, Thessalonica, the different
Yes.
churches. He had relationship with them, and then out of the relationship, they wanted to pour out because of the relationship and the vision that
Yeah.
he saw and had in his heart. And they joined in because of the relationship to that mission. The other thing, and I'm going to make a shameless plug here, Adam, but on our resourcing page, we now have a partnership development resource guide for people, whether missionaries or local missionaries that are doing food pantry or outreach to addicts or whatever, of how do you engage your community and so a lot of the principles that you are speaking are in that resource guide. Hey, you're building relationship. Don't treat them like a person. Those types of things. So I just want to offer that to those that might be on here as a part of the fellowship. We have this resource guide, and actually we would probably need to. It's a beginning, a really good beginning, but myself or Travis would be really helpful in helping put more legs to it. So as you walk it out in your context, so feel free to give us a call.
Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing about all that perspective there. I want to flip it around now. What do you wish that missionaries knew better before they go out into the field? What
That's a great question.
misconceptions do you want to bust up there?
Okay. Help me understand the context of your question. What missionaries need to know before they go to the field, or what they need to know about their counterparts back in home culture?
I would say first one, then the other, because I think they're really relevant. We want to be moving towards health in all these relationships and in all these ministries. We want to be moving towards sustainability, but sometimes the decisions you make up front can have an effect on your ministry 5, 10, even 20 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. So for missionaries heading to the field again, and maybe it's just because it's an important issue for me, but going back to the relationship components. So I have watched at times missionaries who I'm called to the mission field, and instead of, and because of the call of God is like there's urgency attached to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because of that urgency, that sense of urgency, I've watched missionaries leave in an unhealthy way, leave whatever home culture was, home church, home community in an unhealthy fashion, and subsequently burn bridges along the way. So
For
bless God,
example,
I'm going to the mission field.
what are some typical patterns that you've seen of leaving for the mission field in an unhealthy way?
Yeah, so I've watched people where it's like, okay, I'm sit down with their pastor. Hey, God's called me to the mission field. Pastor says, great. Why don't you go to college and get some training? Nope, I'm leaving Saturday. And it's like, I'm trying to help you. You know, I'm not trying to hold you back. I'm just trying to help you.
Yeah.
And the like the it's not uncommon to have a bit of for missionaries to have a good bit of entrepreneurial spirit and a good bit of like, we're just going in that direction kind of an attitude. You know, God builds our makeup, right? He builds our personalities. So you see oftentimes people who are missionaries who sort of have that pioneering spirit. Okay, one of the challenges then is that as I'm going, I just leave everybody who can't get there as fast as I can. I just leave them in the dust. And then when I'm out on the field and I really need some friends, now I'm mad because nobody's with me. It's like, I'm the one who left them. I'm the one who burned the bridges on the way out. Now,
Wow.
it happens the other way too. I've seen situations where a missionary comes to pastor, hey, God's called me to the mission field, and the pastor excommunicate him from the church. Just, well, then get out. We don't want you, which is horrific. So pastors, don't do that. But at the same time, missionaries don't leave with a snubbing your nose at the people in the church who can't see the vision as fast as you can, or who are recommending additional mechanisms for preparation for you. It helps to be able to, as much as you can, to lengthen the timeline of your future perspective.
Mm.
Right? So let's make it practical. I go on a short-term missions trip to wherever. I see the needs that are going on there. There's a call on my life. I'm moved with compassion, all biblical things, to go and address the need. I have to go and address the need today. I show up, I do all that I can, and now it's 72 hours later, and what do? I'm alone because I just left without building I'm going to use the word support team, and I don't mean only financial support. I mean like a mechanism that cares for me, cares for my family, people I can call, people I can communicate with, people that I have a relationship with. So just being able to temper some of that urgency. And what helps is to not just think about that kid I met on the trip, but to think about what am I doing what am I doing today that affects my ministry 5 and 10 years down the road.
Yep.
That's a lengthening of the timeline of your perspective.
Would you say that there's a good rule of thumb between, like, a time period between calling and deployment, where if it was shorter than that, it's probably too soon? Is it 12 months? Is it a year and a half? Like, what have you found to be successful?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I could strictly identify. Probably what I've watched the most is about 2 years, 2 to 3 years. Let me contextualize that a little bit. That's not, I received a call and I do nothing for 2 years. I've received this call and I am in steady preparation mode. Right? So
Yep.
what I see as very successful in deployment are the people who understand that in their calling there is preparation, and they're diligent in that preparation, and then they are deployed with being able to hold the tension between the people who are sending me right? Romans, what is it? Romans 10, Romans 12. I'm horrible at addresses in the Bible. I apologize for all of my theologian brothers and sisters.
It is quite all right because Jesus himself said, "It is written."
It is okay. Let's go with
There you
Jesus's
go.
words. Thank you, Chip. I appreciate
That's
that.
right.
It is written in the book of Romans. I know it's in the book. Um, Everyone who believes on the name of the Lord will be saved. How can they believe in the one that they have not heard? How can they hear unless someone preaches to them? How can they preach unless they are sent? Right? So you have this group of people sending, and then you have this group of people hearing, and the missionary is sort of living in that tension in between. So it takes a little bit of time to build those connected relational strands, if you will, that I'm not going to lose the people who are sending me by just running away too fast, but I am going to move forward and start connecting with the people to whom I'm being sent. And that's probably a couple of years. And I know everybody right now who is early on called into missions thinks I'm crazy and doesn't think that's an accurate timeline and wouldn't want to hear it that way because I'm eager to go get to doing the work right away. But some time to prepare to leave. And then once you get there, there's some time of settling into the country. We worked in the nation of Honduras. I've been working in the nation of Honduras with regularity for about 22 years. And it was probably about 7 to 10 years in of steady, regular work before you could feel a noticeable like shifting of the gears into high gear of efficacy. We had been effective, but there was a whole different level of effectiveness after around a 7 to 10 year kind of time frame.
That's incredible. I've heard a similar time frame being said for senior leaders who take on an existing church. It takes about 7 years
Absolutely.
for
7
that
years.
church to embrace you and vice versa. There probably are a lot of up-and-coming missionaries listening right now, or people who feel that early call and are just wanting to get out in the field right away. What advice would you have with longevity in mind? Like, what advice would you say, no, do this so that you can still be effective a decade from now?
Yeah. First thing is take a short-term missions trip anywhere. It doesn't even have to be to the country you think you're called to. If you feel like you're already called to a country, just take a short-term missions trip and see, like, can I survive in another country for a week, much less 10 years? All right, start with a week. Take a short-term trip to the place that you're going to go, if you can. Like, get to know, start doing research and study on the culture. Look for a good sending organization. For most people, not in every case, but for most people, a good sending organization. YWAM,
For example,
YWAM, fantastic organization. There's a group out of Jacksonville. I know their curriculum more so than I can think of their name. They have a curriculum called Global Pathways. We have fellowship members who are a part of Go To Nations. Go To Nations. Great sending organization. None of these organizations perfect, but great, right? If you're in a denomination, look at whatever the denominational mechanisms that you have. We have members of the fellowship who are in a denomination. So your denomination may have. So a sending network, your church, even if it's not a whole missions organization, your church may have some form of mechanism. Be okay to pursue some degree of education. I get it with the fellowship and with independent ministers. The ordination of God is from God, not from the governing denomination. Fine. But like, get a little bit of schooling. Go to Christ for the Nations. Go to, there's a great school in Colorado. I can't think of the name of it.
Charis Bible College?
Yeah, Charis Bible College.
Yep.
There are a variety of options that in about 2 years' time, you can get some good training and understand basic level, but still some good training on the Bible and on ministry. Go do that. Those things will help. Double down on the relationship with your local church and your local church leadership. So you might be in an independent church. The Lord's calling you to as an independent missionary or maybe with an organization, but double down on the relationship with the leadership at your local church. That is probably your best anchor to soul health is the local church that you're in, especially if you're in a healthy local church. If you're not in a healthy local church, find a new church that is healthy and then double down on that relationship. And then again, lengthen your time of perspective, right? I'm going to be in missions work for the next 10 years. I say that with also saying, if you're moving to a country that you've never lived in before, be willing to let the geography shift as the Lord leads you, right? He may be calling you to missions. That mechanism might be Ireland. And then when you get there, you realize, well, it's really Sweden, right? So let the Lord shift. God oftentimes uses go in this direction, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of gets your feet moving. And then there's more narrowing to the specifics. So how do you make that practical? Like when you're moving to the field, I don't encourage missionaries to start with, okay, I'm making a 10-year commitment. Make a 1-year commitment. Like try it out. Let's see if that's the right place. Let's see if the team you're with is the right team. Give yourself some exit opportunities. Do all the due diligences to make the friends and get acclimated into the culture. But don't put yourself into a position where now you have to break a commitment to somebody to follow the will of God if he's shifting you. And then as you've been there for a 1-year commitment or a 2-year commitment, you go, okay, I can make a 5-year commitment. Okay, then go with a longer commitment. And I'll kind of cap it off with this. Whatever commitment you make, fulfill the commitment. Like if you make a 1-year commitment and you leave the field in 6 months because you can't get along with the people, that's on you, buddy. That's not on, right? Unless there's a handwriting on the wall. One of the things that as independent ministers, we could all just do a little bit better is just keeping our word. So fulfill the entirety of the commitment. The Bible says that a good man keeps his word even to his own hurt.
Yeah.
So finish the commitment. I promise you,
God
young
will honor
minister,
it.
please hear me. God will honor it. And I promise you, in any commitment you make, you will have exit opportunities that you could make an argument are the will of God. If that exit opportunity is full of providence, like there's circumstances, but there's no proclamation of the word of God, don't take the exit. The will of God comes with both proclamation and providence.
That's really
Just
good.
because the
Wow.
moon and the stars align, that can very easily be the temptation of the world, the enemy, and if you can not throw rocks at me, even the Lord. Not that God tempts us, but he did look at his disciples and say, are you guys going to leave me? So I think that sometimes God looks at us and says, if it was really like a lot of money over on that place, would you leave me? Don't do it. Wait for the word of the Lord to match up with the providence. And you have proclamation and providence. So keep your commitments.
It's interesting. I've been extrapolating some themes that I want to repeat back to you to see if I've been hearing all along through our conversation. One is relationship. The kingdom is based on relationship. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost were in relationship together before we were even in in the scheme of things. The other is in the context of relationship, what you just most recently spoke about would be about relational integrity. Honoring your commitments, being a man of your word, man or woman of your word, and consistency. Like if the vision is the vision, there should be consistency. And with consistency comes longevity, because that consistency of that vision will sustain you through. The other thing is a cathedral mentality. We're not building a lean-to for the glory of God in the kingdom. We like our forefathers in the faith before us, they spent generations building 2 or 3 generations building a cathedral. Matter of fact, the cathedral in Spain just got finished. It's with 150 years of construction.
Yeah.
And so there's that tension of the urgency, but having a long-term game and plan of building so that you can build well.
That's exactly right.
All in the context of doing it in relationship. And so those are the things I pulled out of our conversation. Do you feel like I heard well?
100%. 100%. And I love that you brought up the cathedral in Barcelona, because there had to be urgency at the beginning.
Yeah.
So that those foundational layers could be built.
Yeah, breakthrough.
Now you're multiple generations later. So as independent pastors, missionaries, evangelists, whatever your ministry is, right? To allow yourself to think, how is this work today going to affect my grandchildren? Or people you probably won't meet, your great grandchildren. How will my great grandchildren know about Christ because of the work that I'm doing today? That changes how you make decisions. So that longer term thought process of cathedral building, I love that analogy, is vitally important for whatever we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Travis.
That's beautiful. And we have quite a few missionaries in the fellowship that have been apart for a long time. We also have a lot of startup missionaries who are just getting off the ground. Chip and Travis, I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about what kind of resources do we have? What type of membership opportunities do we have to help missionaries get their ministry off the ground, to make it sustainable, to make it legal, so that they can get out in the field and do the work that God's called them to do?
Well, I first want to give opportunity to Travis to talk a little bit about his coaching ministry that you and your family are developing, because I think you're going to be working with missionaries locally and internationally.
Yes, that's correct. So in addition to my work at the fellowship, I serve as the missions pastor at a local church in the Tampa Bay area called Bridgeway Church. And then in addition to that, my wife and I and our son spend a lot of time coaching other ministers. So whether that's pastors in a local church setting, or whether that's missionaries in a foreign setting, or people developing independent 501c3 or like nonprofit organizations. And we work with people a lot, both in best practices, like how do I structure my board? How do I deal with my elders? How am I developing volunteer teams? How are we taking short-term missions trips? Just wide variety of best practices. And then as well for the individual minister, how do I have good soul health? Like how do I take care of my mind, my will, and my emotions, so that my soul, it is written, Paul says, lest I preach to others and then myself become disqualified.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't want to disqualify ourselves because of bad health in the body or the soul or the spirit, for that matter. So we talk a lot about those things. So we present ourselves as a resource for pastors, missionaries, ministers of all kinds to just be able to help through the years of experience in things we've done well and things we haven't done so well.
That's awesome. Well, as far as the fellowship is concerned, we obviously provide an umbrella 501c3 for those that are either local ministers or international ministers that are raising support. And I highly recommend that you set up an organization and not just be an individual minister. There's so many protections that you get. You have to have an organization in order to come under the 501c3 that we have. And we're a little bit of a unicorn because we were established in 1964, and our designation with the IRS allows non-church ministries to opt out of not having to file a 990, which is unheard of. But that's part of the benefit of being a part of the Fellowship Network International. And I would say to you, as I shamelessly plugged our partnership develop resourcing, we have a financial management best practices guide and other practical guides, especially for those that are starting out in ministry, because you're not equipped usually in finance and organizational governance. You're not equipped to understand support raising and how to do partner development. And those things have to be developed, and we are here to help you to develop them, and we want to help you grow. And so I would encourage you to engage, give us a call at the office. You can go to our website, thefellowshipnetworkinternational.net, and give us a call. We want to be relational. We want to partner and long-term in advancing the kingdom together for his glory and for his church to be built. And so we would love to do that with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Travis, for joining us today. This has been quite the conversation. If anything that we talked about today is relevant to you, please reach out. We are here to support. We've got a staff based out of Dallas-Fort Worth that is here to help pretty much any time. Travis is here as the missions director and is working hard to make sure that people get the resourcing that they need. And if you're able, please join us for an in-person event. We've got conferences all year round and meetups in various cities. We're here to help independent ministers like you find the resources they need so you can do your part advancing the kingdom of God. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Appreciate everybody, and we'll hear from you next time.